In the previous videos, we talked about the process of environmental impact assessment study. We have covered the screening, scoping, formulations of terms of reference, baseline study, impact assessment and evaluations of significance, and identifications of mitigation measures. At the screening stage, we want to know whether the proposed development will require the EIA study. You will need to check whether the proposed development falls under the first schedule or second schedule of the prescribed activities. If they are within either the first and the second schedule, EIA study shall be conducted. And then during the scoping, we will determine the key environmental issues as well as the scope of the EIA studies. This later shall be translated into the terms of reference. The terms of reference document the entire process and the methodology to be carried out for the EIA studies. It defines the scopes and emphasis to be studied for the environmental impact assessment. Later, in accordance to the scope defined in the terms of reference, we will need to conduct the baseline study in order to gauge the current conditions of the environment. The data and information acquired from the baseline study will serve as the reference in order to monitor the impacts due to the development as compared to the current conditions of the environment. Later, we will conduct the impact assessment and evaluations of significance. This will give us some ideas whether the impacts due to the development are positive or negative. There will also be rating in terms of the significance of those impacts, so that we can put priority to those giving more significant impacts. And then, based on those priority, we will need to plan and identify the mitigation measures. Those mitigation measures can be considered as the legal pledge given by the project proponent, demonstrating the commitment in order to preserve the sustainability of the environment as a result of the development project. Again, there should be an assessment for this mitigation measure, comparing the impacts before the mitigations and after the mitigations. This shall give us an idea the effectiveness of those mitigation measures. Now let us proceed with the following steps of EIA study. We talk about the EIA report preparations. By now you will have the result from the investigative program. Those results should be compiled in the EIA report, encompassing all the elements in the terms of reference. You will need to review the report once it is completed and ensure the report is comprehensive, coherent, balanced, impartial, and technically acceptable for the submissions to the authorities. Next step, it will be EIA report review. The review process is conducted either at the Department of Environment State Office or the Department of Environment Headquarters. This is dependent on the nature and the locations of the proposed project. If the project falls under the first schedule of the EIA order, the EIA report shall be reviewed by the State Office. Now, if the project falls under the second schedule, the EIA report will need to be reviewed by the headquarters. This is quite clear-cut. Now, if the project is classified under the first schedule, but it travels between 2 or more states, then the EIA report shall be reviewed by the headquarters. This is to ensure the fairness among different states and also to prevent the conflict of interest between different states. Now, the review process by the State Department of Environment and the headquarters of the Departments of Environment are slightly different. For more details, you may refer to the guideline as listed here. Next, we come to the decision-making stage. This shall be at the end of the review process, whether the EIA report is being approved or being rejected. This decision is then conveyed to the project approving authorities to assist them arriving to a decision whether the project should be approved or not. Next step, it will be the project implementations and monitoring. This leads to the subsequent phases of the design, constructions, and operations. Now, the implementation should be in accordance to the planning as specified by the EIA report. After that, monitoring activities will be conducted to verify the findings of the EIA study of the potential impacts identified during EIA scoping process, whether the scoping is correct or not, and also to verify whether appropriate mitigations and prevention measures are properly implemented. The monitoring activities also verify that the measures can effectively mitigate the adverse impacts to the environment. Now, this kind of monitoring is known as the impact monitoring, as the monitoring process focuses on the impacts, whether the potential impact identified is correct, whether the measures are properly implemented, and whether the measure can mitigate the adverse impacts. There is another type of monitoring, which is known as the compliance monitoring. This compliance monitoring ensures the conditions of approval for the EIA are complied with. In this case, environmental audit may also be carried out. The purpose of this environmental audit is to assess the overall project compliance and opportunity for optimizations and further improvement in the environmental management of the project. In another word, this compliance monitoring is an elevation from the impact monitoring. EIA study provide the information and conditions of the environment before and after the development. The potential impacts are identified from the perspective of the project proponent, and mitigation measures are also proposed, also from the perspective of the project proponent. The impact monitoring process will look into whether the EIA study is properly done, whether the mitigation measures are properly implemented, as well as the effectiveness of those measures. Now, when it comes to the compliance monitoring, we are looking into the opportunity for further optimizations or further improvement in terms of the environmental management of the project. Additionally, there is another type of monitoring which is known as the performance monitoring. This involves the monitoring of the performance of the pollution control system and other mitigation measures by looking into their functionality and the performance in controlling the environmental impacts.